Chris, try that again, Chris. Dude, it might have been his internet. Yeah, I think it was your internet that time. You're so blurry.
Starting now. Hello and welcome back to Starcastic Remarks and welcome to the 2023-24 NHL season. Season starting this week, boys. On Thursday, we decided to hit y'all with an extra Starcastic Remarks and something a little bit different than what we're used to doing. We're gonna try me doing the center guy thing. Weird. Ryan's probably very concerned right now, saying that he hasn't really said a word yet. And we're gonna try and stay a little bit more on topic. That's why I'm trying to lead the way here a little bit. So hello, James. Hello, Ryan. How are y'all?
I'm a little upset right now because the Cowboys are really sucking it up. The defense looks good, but the offense looks terrible.
James, how are you?
I'm good because I don't care about football, fortunately, which is weird for a Texan, but
yeah,
perfect. Let's get right into the season preview. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what we did last season. So last year, Stars ended the season second in the Central Division, losing by 1 point to the Colorado Avalanche. They finished 8th overall in the league, in a league that was dominated by the Eastern Conference. They lost in the conference final to the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights in Game 6. Heartbreaking series. So before we get even into this season, what are kind of y'all's takeaways on last season's performance and what that team did and how it met your expectations?
Off to a great start, Chris. Great job.
Thank you.
I think last season was the coming out party for the Dallas Stars. I think you could put that as like the cherry on top for the Stars, because we talked about it and how great the Stars were going to be. We knew they were going to be a pretty decent team. We didn't know about Wyatt Johnston, how good he was going to be, but we knew the team was going to be good. And, you know, none of the league paid attention to the Dallas Stars at all. And now this year, they're getting all the attention right now, including some big-time writers like Dan Rosen, who's picking the Dallas Stars to win the Stanley Cup. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me from last season. It was their coming out party.
Well, the big takeaway for me was like these players aren't good because they played defensively. I mean, that was the whole thing with Dallas. Like, oh, they're such a great defensive team, but they're going to bore you to death. And then we get a new coach who's offensively minded, and suddenly we're one of the best scoring teams in the league. And we still have our defense. Like, it proved how good our players were, even though we knew how good they were. And they excelled even more. Even the best players. Robertson had 20 more points than he did the previous season, which is insane because we were already singing his praises.
Exactly. Yeah. Coaching was one of the big question marks from last year. And that really last year was a season that started full of question marks is what I was thinking. The coaching was obviously the biggest one in my opinion, but then you also had like, does Jason Robertson do that again? That was his first breakout season the year before. Can he keep doing that? We saw Miro Heiskanen. Can he take a step forward? He is not going to have John Klingberg the entire time. Is he going to be able to be the number one guy and play like half the game like he was called to last season? And all those question marks, almost every single one of them were answered in the affirmative. And that's what led to what Ryan said is the coming out party of the Dallas Stars. Nobody expected them to be great, and they were fantastic because everything went their way is what it felt like, including injuries, which I think we'll get into a little bit later on in the episode. So that was last season. Let's see what people are expecting this season of the Dallas Stars. So these odds coming from our own sponsors, DraftKings. So the odds to win the division, we are tied with Colorado at plus 155. By the way, those are the highest odds of any team to win their own division, and Colorado and Dallas have them. So that shows the separation of those two teams over every other division. It's those two teams and everybody else in the Central. That's pretty much it. Stars also have the 4th highest odds to win the conference at plus 700 and the 8th highest odds to win the Stanley Cup. And like Ryan mentioned earlier, lots of staff writers from NHL.com that did their little preseason poll. 4 out of 14 of them took the Dallas Stars winning the Stanley Cup. Lots of others were Carolina was probably the number one prevailing one, which we like to call the Eastern Conference Dallas Stars. We had a lot of Maple Leafs and a lot of Rangers as well. So that's kind of what the media, I'll say, the central media, even the bad media, was thinking about the season going forward. But we're going to save our own predictions until a little bit later, but that definitely shows that people are looking at the Stars as a cup contender. Do y'all think that that's fair for the media to look at them in that light? And how do you think the Stars are going to handle that kind of pressure?
That is going to be really interesting because the one thing they haven't had to deal with all that much is pressure. Like last year, they didn't really have much pressure because nobody was paying attention, like I mentioned. But you kind of, I forget who it was. I think it was on the podcast. I mentioned this last week. The Podman Rush podcast, they kind of talked about how the feeling around the team this year is very different than it was last year. Like they expect that of themselves. And that there's that expectation of, okay, we're the big dogs and everybody else is below us. And this is our year. This is our time to go out and get it. And that's from the way Jim Nill has talked in interviews this off season. It's the way that the players are feeling about it. The coaches are kind of talking about it in that sort of same limelight. So absolutely, the national media should consider the Stars as a Stanley Cup contender.
Yeah. It's not just that they should. It's totally deserved too. I mean, the team, they had a miracle with Otter pulling them to 7 games in the previous playoffs. And then everyone's just like, oh, they just had a good goaltender that time, whatever. And then they come out the next year and they absolutely blow everyone out of the water in like multiple different stats. Really, it was like team stats that really did it. That was the crazy thing for me. It's like our penalty kill was instantly better than it was with bonus. Even our power play was a bajillion times better.
Our defense was better.
Yeah, I think we were lower. We were like 20s or mid-teens in power play with bonus, and we're now like 5th, 7th. We're all the way up top 10 in every single team stat.
Yep. And we'll get into that a little bit later too. But I'm on your point, Ryan. I think the vibes of this team is kind of what's changed the most for these guys. Last year, you get the new coach and it's kind of a feeling out process. How is this really going to go? There's not really any expectations because so much is going to change. This year, we know what we got and we know how they're going to play. And now they just have to go and do it. Yeah. So it definitely goes from a feeling out process to there's an expectation of fantastic things from these guys.
And that probably benefits Jake Ottinger the most. I mean, he loves being in the spotlight. I mean, he does it all the time. He shows up for games that are always big. And now it's going to feel like every single game's big because every single team is going to look at the Stars and they're going to be gunning for him this year.
Well, the other thing with this team too, though, is I would argue we're the only team that really gave Vegas a run for their money. I mean, we were the closest. We were absolutely the closest. And I mean, I talked about it last week as well. Game 1, game 2. They were both won by Vegas, but again, it could have very easily gone in favor of the Dallas Stars. I mean, 3 overtime games in that series. So, I mean, I think that's why a lot of people kind of paid attention is because you look at that measuring stick against the current defending Stanley Cup champions, and Dallas was one of the best teams against the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, and they lost them in 6 after playing probably a pretty bad series for them. That was
they
probably
did
the
not
worst
play
series.
They threw 2 games.
They threw 2 games.
Especially game 3.
They threw them away. Yeah, totally agree. So moving on, we're going to get into some of the changes this year. We're going to start with the additions to this team from last year. We're adding Matt Duchene, great free agent signing. Lots of people loving, kind of replacing the Max Domi. Adding Sam Steele and Craig Smith, kind of replacing some guys on the back end, namely Luke Glendening. For losses, like I said, we lose Domi, Glendening. We also lose Colin Miller, who actually averaged 16 minutes time on ice per game. So a lot of time to make up right there. And also Yoel Kiviranta, who was in and out of the lineup pretty regularly for the Stars last season too. So first of all, let's just get straight to Matt Duchene first. That's the big shiny toy. How do y'all think he's going to fit into this team? What do you think his role is going to be?
Well, obviously, first off, he's going to be on the third line or the pseudo 2B line, whatever you want to call it.
I'm calling him the Sagan line.
Yeah, but the thing is that what's really nice for him is he doesn't have to be the guy. In Nashville, he was one of the guys and was expected to produce. He doesn't have to score 40 goals like he did 2 years ago. I mean, even if he scores 20, that would be fine. And he's at a very low cap hit because he came to a very good Dallas Stars team, and he's not playing super high up the lineup. He might not even be in the top 6. That's how crazy deep this team is. But for me, I think the biggest part of him is how is he going to be able to transfer to the wing, or is maybe Sagan going to be more on the wing and he's going to be more in the center? I don't know. But the thing is how is he going to be able to transition between those two things? That's one of my big things about it.
You also kind of talked about the reduced role that he's going to have. That brings up another question. Is he going to be able to embrace that the same way kind of Jamie Benn did this year, whose minutes were reduced and everyone was talking about it all the time, and he actually got way better, more productive, more energy when he was on the ice, more goals, obviously. Maybe Duchesne can do something like that.
He had more points than both Pavelski and Roope Hintz in the regular season. And I know it's not by much, but still, that's considering you were like a third line center or a second line center, however you look at Jamie Benn, that's fantastic. And like you said, reduced minutes, and he was amazing.
And for Duchesne, I really think it's more who he fits with, honestly. I mean, we're looking at the Sagan Marchment line right now, but he might not end up there in the end. I mean, I think figuring out who he plays best with is going to be one of the key things for him.
Yeah. Quick thoughts on Sam Steele, Craig Smith. What do y'all think of those kind of depth acquisitions? Is it going to be able to replace a lossing Luke Glendening, who great faceoff guy, great penalty killing? He was in the lineup pretty much every game for the Stars. So what do y'all think about the depth changes?
I really like the signing of Craig Smith and Sam Steele both, to be honest with you. Very underrated. Craig Smith is somebody who can score like 10 to 15 goals for you if he plays with the right people. Even on the fourth line, I think he can score that much. But the other thing that he gives the Stars is that offense that Luke Glendening absolutely did not give us. You saw flashes of offense from Luke Glendening in some games, and you'd randomly be like, whoa, that was Glendening? I think we're going to see more of that from Craig Smith. So that's just more depth scoring for the Stars. As for Sam Steele is only 25. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. He's younger than Denis Gurianov, I think, if I remember correctly. So this could be a guy that, if the Stars have a bunch of injuries, if they lose some depth, this may be a guy that can jump up into the middle six and be able to kind of be the Band-Aid until those guys get healthy again. So again, it's just, I mean, and I talked about it several weeks ago. Sam Steele was playing on the top Minnesota last year at points in the year. So I think both of those are very underrated signings.
Yeah. Any thoughts on those, James, other than what Ryan said?
No, pretty much agree with that. I think he's probably a little high on them just because they're new players, but I mostly agree.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about some of the loss on the faceoff dot, especially on the penalty kill. But that's not the most vital role, I don't think.
Yeah, we also pick up Matt Duchesne, which is another center if need be. I mean, if all else fails, we can put him down on the fourth line. Just if we need a center there.
Exactly.
Matt Duchesne on the fourth line.
And then last little mention here, we do get Evgeny Dodonov, who was on the team for the playoffs in the end of the season, but we're going to have him for a full year and see what he can do with Ben and Johnston. And he could put up some career numbers for him with those guys, with the way that line looked the entirety of last season once they got together.
Yeah. I mean, if they can keep that chemistry, that could be honestly, or that's the second line. If they keep the chemistry, without a doubt, that's the second line.
Yeah, fully agree. Let's get on to forwards here in a little bit. I'm just going to run y'all through the forward lines that we're projecting for the Dallas Stars. First of all, the top line remaining the same, old reliable, Jason Robertson, Roope Hintz, Joe Pavelski, one of the top best lines in the league. We would argue the best, just with their consistent point production, consistent defensive play. Roope Hintz being one of the best two-way centers in the league. He's really going to be in the conversation for it's the Selke, right?
Yes.
Best defensive forward. He's absolutely fantastic both ends of the ice, and his face-off gets better every single year. It feels like he gains 2% every single year. We can continue to see that going up. Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, Evgeny Dodonov, like we said, their chemistry is insane. As soon as Dodonov got on that line, their point production grew even to another level, even beyond what Ben and Johnston were doing on their own. This is kind of the question mark line for us, I feel like, is this Sagan line. We got Mason Marchment, Tyler Sagan, Matt Duchesne. If this line meshes, which it looks great on paper, that's the line you want to put there. But we got to see if they can put it all together. We've got question marks on Sagan, question marks on Marchment. Honestly, question marks on Duchesne because he's not been in that position before, too. And then the fourth line, we got Radek Faksa, old reliable defenseman who's playing forward apparently. Ty Delandria on the wing. He's got a little bit of speed, a little bit of, I say, zazziness. And then we got Craig Smith maybe, or Sam Steele. One or either one of those guys really is going to be the odd man out, night in, night out. Could even switch up with a guy young like Sam Steele. You probably want to get him in a couple of games. So Lions guys, what do y'all think of those lineups? Do y'all agree with those? Y'all see those changing at all for the opening night? Any thoughts?
I really feel like that Sagan line can that's really like the moving piece. I mean, you can move. That's going to be plug and play whoever, because the top line we're going to keep. It's worked for 3 years now. It's probably going to keep working. The second line, with Ben is kind of a question mark still, because I mean it is end of season. You're pushing towards playoffs. You have the veterans who know what it means going into playoffs. They're working a little harder most of the time, which isn't a bad thing, I don't think, because it shows that they know how to pace themselves. But if they can keep that up, then that's going to be fine. But it like you said, everyone in that Sagan line's just a bunch of question marks. I mean, who's going to fit where? Who's going to play with who? Honestly, and with having Delandria and I mean Sam Steele too, you can swap those players into that third line as well. However it works. I mean, that I really feel like that's going to be moving around a lot if it doesn't click at the start.
So one of the things I can actually see is Daddy and Duchesne kind of being interchangeable. If Dadonov for some reason doesn't have the same chemistry that he had last year, you can throw Duchesne up into the top 6 and see how he does with Johnston and Ben. I mean, you could put Duchesne in the middle and move Tyler Sagan up to Jamie Benn, because that worked for a period of time with that old duo of Sagan and Ben with Baby Wyatt there. There's just so many different combinations that Jim Nill gave Pete DeBoer that he can deal with and just figure out something that works. And you know what? If they're chugging along and they're doing okay, but Pete DeBoer is kind of hacked off with, he didn't feel like he's getting in they're all. You got 2 guys down in Cedar Park who probably should have made the roster but couldn't because of how many forwards they have who are NHL forwards with Maverick Bork and Stan Coven. So that's just kind of how I feel about that. And I mean, maybe even Sam Steele can get up into the top 6 and just be one of the guys. I don't know. There are just so many options for the Stars.
Yep, that's definitely true. The depth that they have at forward is incredible, and we'll get into that a little bit more. So some more on the Stars offense. Last season, they finished 7th in goals for, 5th in power play percentage, like you were saying, James. They were absolutely fantastic. They increased a ton from the year previous when Bones was there. And incredible depth, especially at center, is the note that I have on here. They have 2 centers on every line pretty much. And that's the reason their faceoff percentage is always so high. They have one guy who is always on their strong side on either faceoff dot, which is fantastic and creates some mismatches in the faceoff dot. And you can see those night in, night out when we're winning 70% to 30. It's insane. Couple of other just notes here. These are kind of what we know about the Stars. The top line is going to be good. I mean, it's been good for 3 years now. It's not going to stop being good more than likely unless Joe Pavelski just falls over. Power play is going to score. That top line with Jamie Benn and Miro Heiskanen quarterbacking it has been unstoppable. It was consistent all year last year. It never really slowed down. It was consistently good the entire year around. And like Ryan mentioned, the depth in the AHL, Stankoven and Bork make almost any other roster in the NHL. The amount of forward depth on this team is absolutely insane. And if you get an injury with a top 6, you can plug in Sam Steele there. You can go get Stankoven, put him in there. You can get Bork and put him in there. And they'll all be very good. And honestly, I'm excited to see that happen, which is probably more likely than not if you believe in
odds.
What would you say? Odds? Yeah, last year, almost no injuries for the Stars. Very few injuries. You feel like we're due for some injuries, even though that's not really mathematically true. But it feels like the Stars are due for some. So any thoughts on those stats, on those knowns that we have for the Stars? Any disagreements there?
The one thing I would like the Stars to be better at is just for the power play to be more consistent. I felt they were very Marchment-ish, Marchment-esque, whatever.
They were.
And I know you're going to go through ups and downs in a season like every team does. But there was a point in time when the Stars were clicking at an unreasonable pace, and then and that was fine. I knew it was going to fall off, but I just don't want to see it fall off as much as it did. I felt like at one point we were like third in the NHL, and then we even dropped out of the top 10 at one point, and it got better after that. But I would just like it to be more consistent. It's not bad. It's just I'd like to see it be more consistent.
And I get that some too, but also just with how the season kind of flowed too. I mean, the power play flowed with how the season went as a whole. I mean, we had the drought in like after New Year's where we couldn't score anything. It felt like, and then as soon as the power play scored like 3 goals in a night, we were perfectly fine again. I mean, it's going to be what's going to pull us out of slumps like that.
Yeah. And I think consistency could be true for this whole team because even though we had a fantastic year last year, it was definitely streaky. I mean, you would go on streaks of 5 amazing games in a row, dominated every team, and then lose 3 to some pretty crappy teams. They don't play the same way every night. Every time you turn on the TV, you got to see which team you're watching.
Yeah, last year was so weird because, I mean, we never went on a loss streak, and our largest win streak was 6 games. Like, it was the strangest year ever if you're talking about, like streaks. Because, like, if you're like, oh, they weren't consistent, like, game there, the way they were playing, maybe yes, but, like, in terms of their wins and losses, they probably were the most consistent team in the league. It just, the way they were playing did not feel that way.
Yeah, for sure. All right, now let's get into some of the negatives we have for the offense. I'll call them questions. Can the top line keep up that production that they've had the past few years? Obviously, it's been staying consistent, but every year we always think during the offseason, is this the year Joe Pavelski finally stops playing like he's 25? So can Pavelski keep that up is really what this question is.
Yeah. I mean, we have no reason to doubt it. He's been doing it for 3 years. So I don't think he's going to slow down. Until he does, he's not. I don't see it.
The thing that convinces me that he's going to continue is just because of the speed of Roope Hintz. I mean, that makes it to where he doesn't have to be fast. He can play positionally, and he's always in the right spot. And that's why he's always, when he's in front of the net, that's why he scores. Because if he's there, then that means they have a ton of pressure, and there's the puck's not going back the other way, more than likely, is what's happening.
And I think the speed of Roope is way underappreciated on what that top line does. Because you think Jason Robertson's not really the fastest guy either. His major downfall when he was a prospect was his skating. Pavelski, obviously older guy, he doesn't have the legs anymore. The speed that Roope has makes the defense have to back off. And it gives more room to Robertson and Joe Pavelski to do their work and to get in the right spots, like you're saying, James. So it really is one guy who's quick and 2 guys who know where to go. And that's what that line really boils down to. So I fully agree with that. And I agree with you too, Ryan. We can't count out Pavelski until he actually just stops doing it because he's not showing signs of slowing down. So,
well, and the other thing
saying it's going to happen.
And you know, let's assume the worst. Let's assume that he can't do what he's been doing the last 3 years. Okay.
Matt Duchene.
You could throw anybody in there, right? And they would be perfect. You could throw Luke Glendening on that line, and he would be like, he get 50 points. Okay.
Yeah, very true.
Like if we still had him, it would be fine. So it really, he's just the perfect complement to Robo and Roope.
Yep. We talked a little bit about how the Seguin line is question marks. What do y'all think that? What do you think will happen there? You think Marchment takes a step forward? You think Seguin finally has guys to play with? Thoughts?
I think Seguin needs to take a step forward more than anything. We should not be expecting it out of Matt Duchene because he's on a new team. He's kind of in an unexpected situation. He expected to stay in Nashville for a good long while. I think he really needs to step it up. And I'm not saying he has to be set like 80, 90 points, but we need to see a little bit more of him than we saw last year. I think he needs to get up to 60 points, and he really needs to lead that line. And if he can do that, that's a huge difference to this team. I mean, imagine trotting out a third line like that can score against any other team's third line. I mean, seriously, if he can, he's the big question mark for me on that line.
I'm going to kind of disagree. I think it's going to be Mason Marchment. I mean, he had a lot worse season than pretty much anybody was expecting last year. He started hot. I mean, he scored the first goal of the Star season last year, and it was a beauty, and then immediately cooled down. But you got to remember, it's a guy who we kind of took a chance on, had one good season, and he's a big guy, good presence, but he's not
Lost
really
his
proven.
dad.
And
He lost his
that's
dad.
what I was getting
That's
to.
huge.
He had probably the toughest year of his life as a person. I mean, moving to a new city, playing for a new team, full new people around you, lost your father in the offseason. I mean, he had a lot of stuff going on other than just hockey in his brain. So I feel like this year he's comfortable with this team, comfortable around these guys. They had a deep playoff run
Like he was a big part of too.
that he was a big part of, made a big step forward in the playoffs. I think he's the one who's going to be making a step forward. I think Seguin can do as much as he can. I mean, this is a guy who couldn't walk 2 years ago because of a surgery that had to get on his hips. So I think he can do as much as he can, but Marchment's the guy who has potential to grow more than Seguin does. Sagan's done his thing and he's on the down end, but we're getting as much hockey out of him as we can. Marchment's the guy that has a higher ceiling right now, I think. And I think he has room to take a step forward, especially with Seguin and Duchesne on his line, two veterans who know what to do.
Yeah, and he can't have a 31 game goalless drought again.
No.
Like we really need him. Now it's nice that we have other options now, even more with Craig Smith, with Sam Steele. I mean, even Fox that can sort of kind of every once in a while score a goal. But you're right. He really does need to step up on that third line, and that's really the biggest question mark with the forwards.
Yeah, and I'm saying it will. I think he fully will. He's a great hockey player. He has all the tools, and I think it was in between the years is what it was last year. And I think he's got that figured out.
And the other thing was like during his goal drought, it wasn't like he wasn't getting his chances. He was getting so many chances. It was insane that he wasn't scoring. I mean, the amount of posts he hit, he probably should have had at least 4 more goals. So, I mean, I can see him jumping up very easily.
Yep. And then the one other negative / question mark I have for the offense, Wyatt Johnston. I mean, sophomore season, infamous sophomore slump. Do we see that happening for him?
No.
I mean, I think a lot of my basis beforehand might have been off of just the way he played last season, how he sustained it through the whole season and then scored like 3 goals in the last 2 weeks of the season as well. But also now he's got 2 veterans on his line with him who've seen a lot
for the entire year, not just the end.
Yeah, he should, even if he's struggling, he's going to have those 2 people on his line. I mean, they're going to try to get him to score if he's having a drought. And I expect that they could very easily get a goal for him. And that could just be what he needs just to spark him back up again.
I'm going to agree with you, James. The thing I'm going to go to is the coaches on the Stars say this kid is weird. Like, this is not a normal progression for a young player like him. So as a rookie, he does not act like an 18-year-old. He does not think like an 18-year-old. He plays like a veteran is what they all say. And I think that's going to continue for him as well. I mean, he doesn't play like a sophomore NHLer. So I don't see a reason to expect that that'll happen to him.
Well, we talked about it all year last year. It's like, okay, eventually he's going to slow down, right? Okay, eventually he's and it wasn't just the offense that got better. It was fairly consistent. It was a little hot and cold, but it was fairly consistent. But his responsibility on the team also grew. Like, he was not playing penalty kill at the beginning of the year. And you saw towards the end of the year, even in the playoffs, he was playing penalty kill with Jamie Benn. So, I mean, the only thing, and Ardell brings it up because right here, is Johnston hurt? He is hurt. He's nursing something. It's something minor. It's not something that's going to keep him out of the opening night roster. But maybe he starts a little slower than we kind of expect him to. And then as that starts to heal a little bit, maybe he starts to ramp it up a little bit. That's what I could see happening. And
you could say the same thing for Rope Hintz, and we'll dig into that a little bit more on Wednesday night on your regularly scheduled Starcastic Remarks. On to defense. This is the side that we are much more worried about than the offense. And honestly, when I went back to look at the stats for the defense, I was kind of shocked that we were so concerned about it. 3rd in the league in goals against, 3rd in penalty kill percentage. I mean, we were one of the best defensive teams in the league last year, and it didn't really feel. It felt like we were outscoring everybody, but it's just because we were winning 4-1, 6-2, stuff like that. Yeah, and no goals, and for the other team, and lots of goals for us.
Yeah, and I totally credit that to our centers a lot too. I mean, you can play Miro so much, but I mean, someone's got to be back for, especially the young defenseman that we had last year. I mean, Nils was basically his first year trying to go a full season, and there were lots of times where people had to come back for him. I mean, that was one of the reasons why he wasn't on the lineup by the end of the season.
Yep. Definitely a team defense is what the Stars play. They're not leaving their blue liners back to dry.
And you have an amazing goaltender behind you.
That is definitely part of it.
Well, and one of the things that's kind of been the hockey jargon of the last couple of years is positionless hockey. I don't know if you've seen that term being thrown around a little bit more often, but it's true. It really is true. You're seeing forwards come back more to help out the defense when defense pushes into the zone. I mean, you see, like we saw, Nils Lundqvist was, on the rush a lot of the time. Miro does it. I mean, we even saw at times it was weird. Esa Lindell do it as well. So it's like that's a thing, and that's kind of the way the game is going, and that's kind of why a lot of people look at the Colorado Avalanche and say they have one of the best D-cores in the league, and why they run 3 defensemen on one of their power play units is because those guys are so interchangeable and they can play positionless hockey. So I think that's something that we need to see the defense kind of do as a team, not just the defensemen, but everybody across the team. We just need to see them do that a little bit more positionless hockey.
Yep. And digging into those defensive pairings off from the team defense, we do have, this is going to be my ideal lineup. I'm going to agree with David, who was on our show earlier. We're going to go Ryan Suter, Miro Heiskanen top pair. Don't boo me for the Suter thing. Thomas Harley, Yanni Hakanpää on the second pair, and then Esa Lindell, Nils Lundqvist on the third pair. And this is kind of what we've been seeing throughout training camp and preseason. And I think this is ideal for coaches as well. On paper, this is what we want. Your 2 big question marks, though, there are, can Thomas Harley do what he did at the end of the season in the playoffs? And the bigger question mark is, can Nils Lundqvist take a step forward and prove that he is an everyday NHLer?
And really that comes down to what he did in the offseason for me. I mean, he had an extended offseason compared to other players too. You got to expect he was doing something to get on the team there, because he came back and he's got a spot with Lindell right now.
Yep, absolutely.
I think both of those players are going to take a step forward. Harley is going to be relied upon a lot this season, and he's really going to need to take an even bigger step than any of the forwards that we talked about with Sagan, Ben, Marchment, Duchesne, any of those guys. He's the one. He's again, like I said a long time ago, 2 players who are needing to be like keys for the team to be really successful is Thomas Harley and Scott Wedgwood. So both of those guys, but especially Harley. Harley.
It looks like Harley's going to be asked to take Colin Miller's minutes, 16 minutes a night. That is a lot for, I mean, he's going to be considered a rookie this year. It's still going to be his rookie year.
And he did it during the playoffs.
Yeah, he was getting 18. He got 18 minutes in the last couple of games. And that's one thing that I was about to point out. I mean, we're going to see hopefully more spread out minutes in the defense this year. I mean, we have Thomas Harley, who should be able to play at least 16, 17 minutes. And we could see him play even more than that. And he's playing with Hakanpää, who would normally average 18 minutes as well. And then you're talking about Lindell and Lundqvist being your bottom pair, which I think those might swap even. I mean, you're probably seeing both the second pairing and the third pairing getting about the same amount of minutes.
Yeah. And the key here for Harley needing to be good is us needing to keep Hakanpää and Lindell from being on a pair as well. Those guys are so good defensively, but David Castillo has a great article talking about how they were terrible in their own zone, couldn't get out. And that probably led to some of the Stars' low possession minutes that they had, actually, which is surprising for a team that had such great offense. But getting out of your own zone with the pairings that I said, Miro Heiskanen, Thomas Harley, Nils Lundqvist, 3 puck movers on one on each pair. I mean, that is exactly what you want to get out of your own zone. A little bit more. Miro Heiskanen, he has been mouthing off this offseason, talking about how he wants to be the best player in the NHL. He's talking about winning the Norris Trophy. He's not being shy about it. I mean, he's the best player on the team. I think everyone generally agrees with that. What do y'all think of Miro Heiskanen? Does he take even another step this season?
If he's talking this much, he better.
He's pulling a straight TO out here saying he's going to be the best player out there, which I love to see.
And he's calling himself out. I mean, that's all. That's not something we've seen from Heiskanen so far. He's pretty quiet, reserved guy, and hasn't been this season. There's 2 separate interviews that I've seen of him talking about wanting to be the best.
Yeah, and he totally has the talent for it too. I mean, we've seen it for years now, and we still think that it may be that he's playing on his offside. He obviously doesn't think that. He just thinks that he just has more there, and he's just not getting it out.
Yeah, he's had that question asked him as well, and he doesn't care. That was pretty much his answer. He's like, it doesn't matter what side I'm on. I'm going to play well either way. The place where I think Heiskanen needs to progress to actually win the Norris Trophy, if he wants to win the Norris Trophy, is the 5-on-5 point production. He needs to find just a way to. What was that?
Goals, just in general too. I mean, he had less goals than who was it? Who had more goals than him last year on the defense?
Colin Miller.
Really?
I think so.
I have to look that up.
Look it up.
I don't know.
He did not have a lot of goals.
He did not.
Yeah.
But I think 5-on-5 is even more important than the power play. The power play, we have guys that are just killers on goal scoring. So I don't really blame that as much. He shouldn't really be shooting from the point on the power play that often. But if he gets on the point and he dances across the blue line the way he can with his backward skating, shoot the puck, man. I mean, there's no reason not to. We've seen his shot. It's fantastic. He needs to use it more.
The only problem is he's got Joe Pavelski, who tips all of his pucks in and takes his goals away.
Takes all of his goals away.
Handicap.
That may be true, yeah. But that's where he needs to progress if he wants to win the Norris. That's the only place he can progress, if we're being honest. I mean, his point production on the power play, top tier. Penalty kill, top tier. His overall defensive play, he's the only guy who can shut down McDavid. McDavid has never had a great game against us. We're probably the only team that can say that.
I wouldn't say that, but most of the time, yes.
Very few.
He has had not as good games against the Stars.
Not as good games. There you go. But watching him on guys like McDavid, McKinnon, he shuts him down. He's like a wet blanket on a fire. It's really incredible. The only place he can progress is that 5-on-5 scoring. Was I right, Ryan? Did you look it up?
Yes, he is. So you were not right. Mira actually, he had 11 goals. And here's a question for you: who was second
on defense?
Mm-hmm.
It was Suter, wasn't it?
Nope.
Hockenbaugh.
Nope.
Oh, who was it?
It was Asa Lindell.
He did crash in a lot last year for him. Sometimes he just blazing straight through the middle of the zone. And everyone's like, wait, who is that?
Wait, is that Mira Heiskanen? No. Oh, no, that's the wrong number. All right, well.
All right, last and most important position, goaltending. Jake Ottinger, obviously fantastic regular season, not as great postseason. His regular season stats, 37 wins, 11 losses, 11 overtime losses. His save percentage, he was number 4 in the league with .919. Goals against average was number 7. That's amongst guys with at least 20 games played at 2.37. And like I said in the playoffs, his save percentage dropped from .919 to .895. 20-point drop there, and his goals against average went from 2.37 to 3.06. So pretty big jump from there. We talked a lot about it was way overworked in the regular season, and probably injured in the playoffs as well. So talk a little bit about Otter. What are y'all expecting from him? What do you think we see?
I think he's going to hit the 40 games win plateau this season. I think he does that. And the Stars are golden if we can get that. I would like to see him play a little bit less games, but the more I've thought about it, he hasn't said that he wants to play less games, and it doesn't seem like, based off of what Pete DeBoer has said, that he plans on playing him any less. So maybe he just needs to have the right rest at the right time. If that makes any sense.
That's what he's talked about during the offseason too, though. He talked about he's learning how to recover faster. I mean, that's part of his whole deal. And also, if I want to throw out a prediction out there, I think his save percentage probably gets even better. I mean, it's gotten better the past 2 years he's been in the league. I expect him to hit .920 this year.
Yeah. And his recovery, I think, is going to be a big thing for him. You got to remember, he's still learning how to be a full-time goaltender in the NHL. Last season was his second year of doing it, and he played more than almost any other goalie. So he's doing the most, and he's probably one of the least experienced at doing it. So
I think he was third in time on ice among goalies.
Yeah, that's incredible. And we're expecting him to play more. We want him to play more. or we're expecting him to play less. Sorry, we want him to play less. And let's get into the guy who should be starting over him at least a couple of games. Scott Wedgwood, last season, 19 wins, 9 losses, 8 overtime losses. That is incredible. How many overtime losses we have, but we're not going to talk about that. Save percentage, 915. Very good when he was in the game. Goals against average, 2.72. So
Still
maybe
pretty
got a little bit more protection from our defense, but that's good. I mean, you're supposed to do that when you got your backup goaltender, and you're supposed to acknowledge that and play better in front of him. And the Stars definitely did that. Injuries. I mean, he's been injured 2 previous seasons. We really need him to be healthy, especially down the stretch when we're getting closer to the playoffs, to give Otter some rest. So what are y'all expecting from Wedgie? Ryan, you talk about how he's one of the keys to this team.
Well, he's a key to this team because of the fact that Otter needs to be more ready for the postseason. I mean, I'll be totally honest with you. I know we should end up first in the Central Division, but I really don't care. I mean, as long as we're top 3, I mean, you look at the teams that have won the Stanley Cup in the last couple of years, they haven't necessarily been the best team in the conference. They might, I mean, like Colorado was the best, and I think Vegas was the best in the Pacific, but
best in the division.
Yeah, they were best in their division. So, but I mean, Tampa Bay didn't really care. They were 3rd, and they won 2 straight cups back to back with getting the 3rd seed in their division. So, the main thing I'm looking for is postseason success. I mean, we're at the Toronto Maple Leafs level for us. Like we're a great regular season team. We need to see them, compete the ultimate goal, which is win the Stanley Cup. That's what Stars fans should be looking at.
Yep, agreed. And I think Wedgie does play a key role in that, in playing those games, keeping Otter fresh, like you said.
And I think he could play the same amount of games too and get the exact same record he did, and that would be perfect. It's just got to be games at better times.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of like in streaks. He played most of his games all in a row.
Yes, very true. And a lot of those games, so it looks like normal backup numbers. A lot of those were when Otter was injured, which he was actually injured, I think the second month of the season, actually, for like 2 or 3 weeks. So that kind of bumped his numbers up there to make it look normal. But he's definitely was out for the full second half, which was crazy. So definitely need a healthy goalie there. And the problem is we don't have a third. I mean, you look at Remy Poirier. I mean,
he's not ready.
Yikes. He's not an NHL goalie right now. I mean, he's definitely still being developed. So we need to have Wedgie healthy if we want to have a good regular season. But overall, I agree with your sentiment there, Ryan, is like this team is going to make the playoffs. And that kind of gives me a weird vibe going into the season. It's like, yeah, these games matter, and I really care that they do well. But as long as they get in, I mean, this is a team built for the playoffs, so we talked about that a lot. So they just need to get in, is what I feel like. They're getting into predictions here. They just need to get in. That's all I want for the regular season. What are y'all's thoughts?
I don't know. It's like I want them. Of course, I want them to win the division. Like that would be cool. We haven't seen them win the division in a very long time. There's a lot of hype around them. Colorado appears to be taking a step back after losing a bunch of depth. I mean, that's my prediction for them, is to win the division. I don't necessarily care. I don't. If they get first, second, or third, that would be fine. But that's my prediction for them, is they get first in the Central, because there's no other team other than Colorado that should be beating them. So at least top 2.
I don't even know that Colorado should be beating them this year. It really depends. I feel like Colorado has so many question marks over there. I mean, they could all get answered, and they're probably first in the division again. But that's the Stars last year. I mean,
we should have
gambling
won.
at that
we
point.
should have won. We should have won the division last year.
We should have won the division. Yeah,
because of our, what was it, like
19.
14 overtime losses that we.
It was
crazy. You take two of those, and you win 2 of those 14 games, and the Stars are first in the Central Division.
We only had to win 1. We had to tie.
Oh yeah, you're right.
We had more regulation wins.
So that's just what it is. So yeah. I don't know.
I expect, my prediction for this team is that they win the division. This team on paper is better than the Colorado Avalanche by a pretty safe margin, honestly. Colorado is still number 2, but the Stars should be a better team. The only team that I think stacks up to them in the Western Conference is the Vegas Golden Knights, which showed in the playoffs last year. I mean, if this team is playing well and they have a good season and they're not too hurt, which really could happen, they should win the division safely. But like I said, I kind of agree with you, Ryan, where I don't really care. They should get, if they're in, they have a great chance at winning the cup just because of the way their team is built.
I think there's some other teams that are up there. I think like the Oilers, just because of McDavid and Draisaitl, they can drag that team kicking and screaming into the Stanley Cup final. I mean,
but as far as a full team that has been built, which full team, not just looking at one great guy, because that's really what pulls Colorado up as well. The full roster with the depth and everything, what team is better than the Stars and the Knights in the West?
I think without a doubt, the Stars are the deepest in the West, even more than the Golden Knights. I think that's not even a question. The Golden Knights had a crazy goaltender come out of nowhere, and that's how they won. I mean, that happens. That happens a lot. It's happened many times before. It's going to keep happening. But I mean, when you're talking about who is the deepest right now and who is probably going to be the most consistent, it should without a doubt be the Dallas Stars in the West.
All right. And then moving on beyond regular season, we're going all the way. Who's going to win the Stanley Cup this year? Where are the Stars finishing?
I'm going with my answer that I always go with now. The Dallas Stars are winning the Stanley Cup.
I mean,
because it's not fun otherwise.
We have to be Homer here, right?
We
have to be Homer here.
If you're not going to be Homer this year, then
they're the most favorites that they've been in a really long time. You better be a Homer.
Like I have not. I go back a lot.
Gone.
A lot of them are gone. Yes,
yeah,
there's still the question.
Compared to last year, there's very few questions.
Yes. There's still some question on defense, and I think that's where Colorado is a little bit better than us, is on the defensive side. But we've got a way better offensive core. We've got better goaltending. So, I mean, why can't the Stars go all the way?
Yeah, I mean, the expectation for this team obviously has to be Stanley Cup with where they finished last year. I mean, if you really think about it, they were the true number 2 team in the league last year after what the Knights did to the Panthers. There's nowhere else to go but to win the cup for this team. They're fully built for it. They're all in. They've made some incredible trades for players. Players are losing money to try and win a cup. I mean, you look at Joe Pavelski's contract. He throws away money to stay on this team and for this team to get better players. I mean, Joe Pavelski taking a pay cut gets Matt Duchene. Yep. We don't get Matt Duchene unless Pavelski signs the contract that he did this offseason. All these players win a cup. Everybody in the NHL, if they don't want their team to win the cup, they want Joe Pavelski to win the cup. I mean, the Stars are a
bandwagon team.
We are the bandwagon team. We're a favorite.
Yeah, but not Jamie Benn, though. Nobody wants Jamie Benn to win the cup. But they want Joe Pavelski to win the cup.
Only we want Jamie Benn to win. But yeah, I mean, y'all tuned into a podcast called Starcastic Remarks. You should expect us to pick the Stars to win the Stanley Cup. All 3, stamp of approval. Dallas Stars are winning the Stanley Cup. That's our prediction. Any thoughts on the season, guys, before we wrap this thing up?
I hate the Wild.
I hate the Predators.
Nah, I don't hate the Predators as much because they're not going to be as good this year. The P-Caps
I want to beat them 7-0 every single time we see them.
Finish them. I cannot stand Wild fans right now. I cannot stand the team. They're a bunch of like butt heads and Bill Guerin is sitting there just extending all those butt heads away, and they're going to be a terrible team. I think that's
all right, guys. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Let us know what you thought of this kind of weird format, me doing it. I don't know how it went, but y'all tell us. We will be back Wednesday night for your regularly scheduled Starcastic Remarks. Going to dig in a little bit more to the game, digging a little bit more to the injuries that we have seen recently, and jabber on a little bit more. Thanks to our sponsors of this podcast, DraftKings. Use that promo code THPN anytime you're over there for some free goodies. And pick the Stars to win the Stanley Cup. Guaranteed. That is financial advice, by the way. Yep, so use that as financial advice.
Without a doubt.
To bet on the Stars to win the Stanley Cup.
Whole life savings.
Okay. Look at our name and realize that was very sarcastic. Okay.
Please don't sue us.
All right.
All right. I think that's it. All right, I'm wrapping it up. All right, thank you guys for tuning in. For James and Ryan, I'm Chris. Y'all have a great evening. Go Stars.